Hello and welcome. Today we are diving into the journey Dante took through hell in the first part of his epic poem, The Divine Comedy. The Divine Comedy is divided into 3 parts. The first part is Inferno or Hell, which will be the focus of this video. The second part is Purgatorio or Purgatory, and the final part is Paradiso or Heaven. Now I must say that Inferno is essentially medieval fanfiction. Dante was a deeply religious Catholic poet, but he was also a huge fan of classical mythology and literature. When he was writing Inferno, he mixed biblical ideas with Greek and Roman legends to create his own very imaginative idea of hell. This is not an official Christian doctrine of the afterlife, it's Dante's creative vision. To let you know how much creative license Dante took, not only is he the main character, but he also used the book to roast people he didn't like in real life. He writes several of his political enemies into hell as damned souls. In fact, some of them were even still alive when he published the book. At this point in Dante's life, he was beefing with a lot of people. He was also recently exiled from Florence due to politics. Dante's side lost and he got banished, so as a power move of some sort, he wrote his haters into hell. Okay, enough with the preamble, let's dive into the book, into the 9 circles of hell. The journey to hell doesn't begin in hell. It starts on earth in a dark forest. Dante opens up the book with one of the most famous lines in literature. In the midway of this our mortal life, I found me in a gloomy wood, astray from the path direct. In plainer terms, Dante wakes up and realizes he's lost in a dark, scary wood because he wandered off the straight path. Wandering off the straight path, I believe, is a metaphor for having lost his moral way in life. He's about 35 years old at this point and going through a midlife stroke spiritual crisis. Dante doesn't remember exactly how he got into this mess. He says he was so sleepy and dazed when he wandered off the right road and somehow found himself in the woods. But now that he's awake, Dante is understandably freaked out. He sees a hill ahead with sunlight at the top and decided that this was his way out of the dark wood, so he started climbing toward the light. But just as he starts to climb, his path is blocked by not just one but 3 beasts, a panther, a lion, and a she-wolf. The 3 beasts drive Dante back into the darkness. Each of the beasts represented different sins or temptations that stopped Dante from escaping the woods. The lion represented pride or ambition. The panther represented pleasure or luxury. According to Dante, the she-wolf was the worst. When he saw her, he knew he had no hope of getting past her and escaping the woods. The she-wolf symbolized insatiable greed and avarice. So Dante is now back in the woods after the 3 beasts push him back. And from the distance, he spots a figure approaching. Dante calls out desperately for help. The shadowy figure reveals himself to be Virgil, the long-dead Roman poet. You would want to know that Dante was a big fan of Virgil. So Dante the author wrote his literary idol into the story as his personal guide. Dante the character is awestruck upon seeing Virgil, so there's Dante the author and Dante the character. He didn't know if he was seeing a spirit or a living man because at this point, Virgil has been dead for over 1,300 years. Virgil introduces himself as the poet from ancient Rome. Dante started to blush like a schoolboy talking to his crush. He calls Virgil his master and inspiration and asks for his help out of the dark woods. Virgil explains that Dante can't simply climb the hill up out of here right now because the 3 beasts won't let him, but tells him not to fear. There was another path Dante could take. The path wasn't gonna be easy, but it was the only way out. Virgil says he will guide Dante through the realms of the afterlife, starting first down through hell to witness the eternal consequences of sin. He asks Virgil, "Why me though? Am I even worthy of this journey? It's not like I am Ananias or St. Paul." Virgil then explains the backstory, how both of them found each other in their current predicaments. In Dante's real life, he was deeply in love with an Italian woman named Beatrice. The crazy part is that Dante met this woman just twice in his life, but that didn't stop her from being the love of his life. Beatrice had died when Dante the author was writing the Divine Comedy, so he wrote a character after her. The character Beatrice, who was now a spirit in heaven, noticed that Dante had gone astray. She then leaves heaven and finds Virgil in limbo to ask him to go rescue Dante. In Dante's poem, Beatrice represents divine love and grace. She, along with two other heavenly ladies, Saint Lucy and the Virgin Mary, cared about Dante's soul enough to send him a guide. Virgil even tells him they have the green light from God and they are good to go. That was enough to convince Dante, and off they go to find the gate of hell. Virgil leads Dante to the entrance of hell. They arrived at a gate that had dreadful words carved in stone. The final line of the words read, "All hope abandon, ye who enter here." As Dante reads this, he is seized with terror. He tells Virgil, "Master, these words sound terrible." In fact, in the translation I read for this video, Dante says, "Master, these words import a hard meaning." I couldn't have said it any better. But Virgil the guide gives him a little pep talk. He tells Dante not to be afraid, that they were at the entrance to hell by the will of God and that he should trust him. So with that, they cross the threshold into hell. Immediately they cross the threshold, Dante is hit with a wall of sound. The air is filled with wailing, screams, loud moans, horrible languages, outcries of woes and accents and anger. It's a total cacophony of despair. Dante is so shaken by the sheer auditory assault of suffering that he starts crying. Gets used to Dante weeping and fainting. Early on in his journey through hell, Dante is extremely sensitive to the suffering he sees. They are not technically in one of the 9 circles of hell at this stage. They are in the vestibule of hell, sort of like a lobby just as you enter the gates. The souls in this area are people who in life never took a stand for good or evil. They were just neutral. These are folks who only cared about themselves and refused to choose any side. Even the angels who did not pick a side in the war between God and Lucifer also ended up in this lobby. Dante describes them as cowardly souls who lived without infamy or praise. Their punishment was that they endlessly chased a blank flag as it flew through the air. Just picture swamps of souls constantly running behind a flag that they can't catch. The blank flag they are chasing represents the aimlessness of their life choices. But that's not all, of course, that's not all. They are also relentlessly stung by wasps and flies, which cause them to bleed and cry, and then worms at their feet drink the blood and tears. So in life, these souls stood for nothing, and in death, they chase nothing and are tormented by stinging remorse. Dante was someone who had a strong moral compass, and he was disgusted by the souls in this area. He even recognized one of the souls. Dante simply describes him as a man who abjured or renounced his high estate. Some interpretations believe Dante was referring to Pope Celestine V, who abdicated his papal power in 1294. Dante was so disgusted with these souls that he did not bother talking to them. Virgil even tells Dante, "Speak not of them, but look and pass them by." He's like, let's move on. These wretches are not worth our time. They are not even in hell proper, because even hell doesn't want them. So Dante and Virgil continue on their journey. They reach the banks of River Acheron. This river marks the real boundary of hell's first circle. At River Acheron, newly arrived damned souls gather to be ferried across by Charon, the boatman from Greek mythology. He shuttles souls from the mouth of the river to their assigned circles in hell. Dante describes Charon as a demon with eyes of burning coal that collects all who do not fear God. Charon spots Dante and shouts, "Get out of here, living soul! This is no place for the living." He knew that Dante did not belong here and refused to ferry him along, but Virgil intervenes. He tells Charon to calm down and that the journey was willed by heaven. You have to let him pass. So Charon agrees. He ferries Dante and Virgil along with a crowd of souls. But as they get closer to the first circle, Dante gets overwhelmed by fear, and combined with a sudden earthquake that erupts, Dante passes out cold. By the end of chapter 3, Dante faints from fear. He regains his senses on the other side of Acheron, and the real tour begins. Dante wakes up when they get to the first circle of hell, also known as Limbo. Immediately, Dante notices that the mood in this circle was different. There was no screaming or physical torment. The only thing he heard was sighs that made the air tremble. The souls in this circle were sighing from grief. In Limbo, the souls were of good and virtuous people, but unfortunately for them, they were not baptized. They lived decent lives, but through no fault of their own, they never knew about Christ and never got baptized. Most of the souls here lived before Christianity, as well as infants and other good people who died without baptism. These souls are not tortured. Their punishment is just to exist here without hope of ever seeing God. They are eternally stuck in longing. As Dante puts it, they are afflicted to desire without hope. They yearn for heaven, but they can never reach it, which is quite sad if you ask me. It's not their fault they existed before Christ and Christianity. As Dante and Virgil are walking through the darkness, Dante notices that his companion had grown a bit pale. Virgil admits to Dante that he also belongs in Limbo. Virgil was born 70 years before Christ was born, and he died 19 years before Christ. So basically he had no chance. He was a virtuous pagan, a good man who died before Christ, so he's not saved. Dante started to feel sad and asked if anyone had ever left Limbo for heaven. Virgil then shares a cool story. He says once their savior descended into hell and rescued the souls of biblical figures like Abel, Moses, Abraham, King David, Israel with his sons, and many others. Basically, the righteous souls from the Old Testament who were in hell was taken up to heaven. That was a one-time event, and since then, no other soul has left Limbo. You also notice that I said the Savior. In the first part of the poem Inferno, Dante never mentions Jesus Christ. Lombardi, an Italian literary critic from the late 18th century, said he believed Dante, restrained by awe and reverence, chose not to mention the name of Christ in a place of torment. So instead, he referred to Christ as our Savior. As Dante and Virgil continue their journey, Dante sees flames on the side of the summit. Then he hears a voice that says, "Honor the bad sublime." As soon as the voice stopped, Dante sees 4 mighty spirits walk towards them. These were the spirits of Homer, Flaccus, also known as Horace, Naso, also called Ovid, and Lucan. All 4 spirits were classical poets that Dante was huge fans of. He was starstruck again. He chats briefly with them, and then this famous poet invites Dante to join their band. His exact words is that they made me of their tribe, and he sees it as a huge honor. As they continue walking, they arrive at a magnificent castle. The castle was 7 times surrounded with lofty walls. It was round and defended by a pleasant stream. Next, they pass through 7 gates and enter into a lovely green field. He sees more great spirits like Euclid, Electra, Julius Caesar, Socrates, Plato, Orpheus, Diogenes, and many more. This group of spirits are basically every famous non-Christian character, whether real or fictitious, that Dante loved, all of them hanging out in limbo forever. Eventually, Virgil leads Dante away from the castle and the all-star group of spirits, and they move on. At the end of the chapter, Dante says his guide leads him to a path where no light shines. From this point on, things are about to get much harsher. Dante is leaving behind the relatively chill vibe of limbo. Things are about to get hot. Dante and Virgil walk down into the second circle of hell, and immediately, Dante notices it's darker and contained much more grief. The first thing they encounter is Minos. In classical myths, King Minos of Crete became a judge of the dead, and Dante turned him into a monstrous, demon-like figure with a long tail. Minos sits at the front of Circle 2, assigning each soul to its level of hell. As souls come before him and confess their sins, Minos wraps his tail around himself a certain number of times to indicate which circle the soul must go. Basically, 1 wrap for the first circle, 2 for the second, etc. If you've watched Harry Potter, Minos is basically Hell's sorting hat. When Minos sees Dante, he wants him to be careful with how he enters Hell and mind who he trusts. And just like clockwork, Virgil steps up to Minos. He asks Minos why he was exclaiming and that he should not hinder Dante's path. That Dante was appointed by destiny, so of course, Minos lets them pass. Now Dante enters the actual circle, the circle of lust. There was no light at all in this place. In Circle 2, there was a hurricane of darkness and tempestuous winds that tossed the souls around and around without rest. Dante heard their screams, lamentations, moans, and blasphemies against the good power in heaven. The souls in this circle were led by passion and sexual desire and were swept up in the tempest of lust, so as their punishments, they will forever be blown about by a storm. Blown about. They cannot control their direction, just as they couldn't control their urges. Dante asks Virgil to name some of these souls that were getting blown around. Virgil points out a few famous people from history and myth. He points out Semiramis, a legendary Lydian Babylonian queen who was getting punished for her sexual vices. There was also Cleopatra, Helen of Troy, Achilles, Paris, Tristan, and basically any popular figure who died for love or caused destruction because of love. Dante is especially moved when he sees Francesca da Rimini and Paolo. These two are actually from Dante's own time. Francesca was a noble woman who fell in love with her husband's younger brother Paolo. When their affair was discovered, her husband murdered them both. Dante is super sympathetic. He asks Francesca to tell their story. Francesca's response is pretty heartbreaking. She replied, "No greater grief than to remember days of joy when misery is at hand." But Francesca goes on to tell their story. One day, she and Paolo were innocently reading a tale about Lancelot and Guinevere, a tale of forbidden love. They were alone together, and as they read about Lancelot kissing the queen, the story seduced them into acting out what they read. Paolo, overcome with lust, kissed Francesca, and as she concludes her story, she says, "We read no more that day." It's a delicate way of saying that the kiss led to their adultery. As Francesca spoke, Paolo stood by, weeping. Dante is so moved by their sad tale of love and death that he literally loses consciousness out of pity. "I fainted as if I had met my death," he says. Yep, Dante faints again, this time not from fear, but from getting overwhelmed with pity. Imagine being so overcome by a love story that you pass out. Dante sure is an emotional guy. Dante wakes up from his fainting spell and finds that Virgil has guided him down to the third circle of hell. This level housed the gluttonous. As Dante wakes up, His senses is immediately assaulted by the new environment. The weather was heavy and cold. There was constant showers, but not showers from rain, but of discolored water, filthy slush and muck. The whole land also stank. The ground was basically a gigantic, vile garbage heap of putrid mud. The gluttonous souls lie in these fields howling and wallowing, but unable to escape. Guarding and tormenting these souls is none other than Cerberus, the three-headed dog monster from classical mythology. Cerberus being the guard of this circle also makes sense too. The souls here committed the sin of gluttony and were all about their excessive appetites. Cerberus was also a ravenous beast. When Cerberus spots Dante and Virgil, he bears his fang at them and his mouth started drooling. Cerberus is hungry, and just like you would expect, Virgil steps in. He stoops down, scoops up 2 handfuls of nasty mud and flings it into Cerberus' mouth. Cerberus, the eternal eater, jumps on the mud like it was the treat. Cerberus is a munch. This momentarily distracts the beast and allows Virgil and Dante to slip past. As they continue their journey in this circle, a soul suddenly sits up and addresses Dante. The soul actually recognized Dante. Is a man from Florence nicknamed Chiaco. His name literally means hog or pig, how appropriate for a glutton. Dante could barely recognize Chiaco because the muck and filth in this circle had disfigured him. Dante feels pity for Chiaco and asks him what happened to him. In his reply, Chiaco speaks about the future of Florence instead. He predicted political conflicts and basically foretold Dante's own exile from Florence. Dante then asks for the fate of some other Florentine figures. He wanted to know where they were, whether they were in heaven or in hell. Chiaco replies they are deeper in hell for worse sins than himself. He calls them blacker spirits than himself, and that Dante may see them deeper in hell if he continues his journey. With that note, they continue on. Next, Dante and Virgil descend to the 4th circle where they encounter Plutus, the Greek god of wealth and abundance. In this circle though, Dante writes Plutus as a demon guarding the circle of greed. As Plutus sees Dante, he exclaims, "Oh Satan, oh Satan," and I don't blame him either. It was strange to see a living soul in hell. But as usual, Virgil sharply scolds Plutus. He says something like, "Silence, you accursed wolf, stuff yourself with your rage." Commentators say that the word wolf here symbolizes greed. Remember that this is the 4th circle of greed. As Plutus hears Virgil's word, Plutus collapses deflated, and so they move on. Now inside circle 4, Dante sees a huge number of souls divided into 2 groups. They are pushed up against each other in a big ring, like the opposite sides of a battlefield, and each soul is rolling a massive weight the size of a boulder. As one group shoves the weight forward, the other pushes back. They crash into each other and immediately each soul starts yelling at the soul across from them. One will say, "Why do you hoard?" The other will say, "Why do you waste?" Then they turn around, push the weight the other way, collide on the opposite side and shout again. This sequence repeats forever. The group of souls in this circle are the hoarders and the wasters. These people were guilty for the same kind of sin, just in different forms. It's either they hoarded their wealth, they never spent or shared it with anyone, or they squandered their wealth, spending lavishly and wastefully. Now in hell, they are tied together in the ultimate game of tug of war. Dante as usual tries to see if he could recognize anyone. Dante is always on the lookout for his haters or those he disliked. Dante couldn't recognize anybody in this circle. He notes that many of them have shaved or cropped hair. Guess who had funny hairstyles in the Middle Ages? Religious men. Virgil explains that many of the people in this circle were clergymen, popes and cardinals, members of the church who were greedy. However, none are individually recognizable now. Their obsession with money when they were alive made them indistinguishable, and in hell their identities are lost. Having observed the endless clash between the miserly and the lavish, Dante and Virgil move on. They head down to the next circle. They come upon the river Styx, which in Dante's hell is a swampy, stagnant marsh rather than a nice, flowing river. The marsh is the fifth circle, where the souls of the wrathful are punished. Dante looks into the dark, muddy water and sees people screaming, biting, and fighting each other. These souls are the ones who were overcome with anger, those who indulged in wrath, aggression, and rage in real life. So in their afterlife, they are locked in eternal combat, tearing each other apart in frustration, forever furious. Meanwhile, there were other souls lying completely submerged beneath the sludge. These souls are the sullen or slothful. These people harbored anger inwardly and were always gloomy. In life, they never expressed or enjoyed the light of the sun, so now they are literally submerged in darkness. They can't speak, only let out bubbles. Dante and Virgil need to cross this filthy marsh. Luckily, there's a boatman there, not Charon this time, but Phlegias, the mythological king who burned Apollo's temple and was damned for his own sin of wrath. Phlegias speedily crosses the water to ferry the souls. When he sees that one of the souls is a living being, he wants to start to complain, but Virgil steps in and does his let us pass routine, and Phlegias grudgingly gives them a ride. As they float across, a figure in the water rises up, and Dante can make out a muddy face. The soul says, "Who are you, coming here before your time?" Dante, in a rare moment of boldness, responds, "I come, but I'm not staying. Who are you, and how did you end up so foul?" The muddy soul says, "I am one who mourns." For some reason, this soul irritated Dante. Dante is like, "Well, stay there and weep, you damned soul." Then Dante suddenly recognizes the soul. He is Filippo Argenti. Argenti was a real-life person from Florence, and he was also a bitter political enemy of Dante. So Dante shows him no pity at all. In fact, when Argenti tries to grab the boat, Dante shoves him back into the swamp. Argenti is furious and starts biting himself in rage. Remember, this is the circle of wrath. Dante then witnesses all the other wrathful souls gang up on Argenti. They start crying to Filippo Argenti and they start to tear him to pieces in their collective wrath. Not only did Dante feel no pity, he gave thanks and praise to God for the suffering Filippo Argenti was going through. If you've been following, you will notice that this is the first time he outrightly condemns a sinner. In other levels, he usually felt pity and sadness for the suffering souls. But as he goes further down into hell, his attitude is changing. He is starting to see that the souls deserve their punishment, and this is divine justice. They then reach the far side of the swamp. Rising up before them are the towering walls of the city of Dis. This is the fortified inner city of hell that contains circles 6 through 9. This is lower hell. The walls of the city were framed by iron and surrounded by a deep moat. The gate was also guarded by more than 1,000 fallen angels. Dante and Virgil steps out of Phlegias' boat and Virgil says, "This is where we go in." But the fallen angels are not having it. They slam the gates shut and refuse entry to Dante because he is a living man. For the first time since they started their journey, Virgil is stumped. Up to now, his silver tongue has gotten them past every monster. These angels tell Virgil that Dante isn't coming in. At this point, Dante is terrified. There is no way he can find his way back after coming this far, and he was also scared of getting stuck outside the swamp. To make matters worse, the Furies and other monsters appear and block their path. But just as it seems like there was no more hope, a divine angel from heaven comes to their rescue. The angel touches the giant's gate of Dis, and the door opens. Virgil and Dante can now enter the city of Dis unopposed. Dante is a bit shaken but relieved. With the gates open, they can now step into Circle 6. Circle 6 is a vast field of tombs with their lids wide open, scattered across the landscape. Every tomb is red hot, surrounded by flames. Just imagine a cemetery on fire. From within these burning tombs, anguished voices are crying out in torment. Virgil explains that these are the heretics, people who denied fundamental church doctrines. Dante specifically targeted the Epicureans. He did not like them at all. The Epicureans thought that the soul dies with the body, so for their sin of heresy, their punishment is getting burnt forever in a tomb. When Dante approaches one of the tombs, he sees that the soul inside is Faranita degli Uberti, a famous war chief of the Ghibelline party, which happens to be the opposite side of Dante's faction. Faranita had also been a strong Epicurean. He did not believe in the afterlife and was posthumously declared a heretic, so it's no surprise that he is in the circle of hell. Dante depicts Faranita as a proud, towering figure who rises out of his burning grave from the waist up. Faranita and Dante begin to have a tense chat. Faranita asks, "Who were your ancestors?" Dante tells him, and Faranita scoffs and says that twice he has chased Dante's allies out of Florence. Dante then shoots back with some sass, saying Faranita allies has also been kicked out in return. The whole conversation is just weird and petty, especially since they are having it in the middle of hell. Before the conversation escalated further, another figure shows up on the side of Faranita in the tomb. Only his head is visible above the brim of the grave. This new figure is Cavalcante de Cavalcanti. He is the father of Guido Cavalcanti, a famous poet and friend of Dante. As Cavalcanti sees Dante, he asks, "Where is my son? Why isn't he with you?" Dante replied straight, "I didn't come here on my own. I'm here with someone that your son might not enjoy his company." Dante said this because Virgil was a poet, and Guido, the man's son, was not a big fan of Virgil or poetry. Guido preferred philosophy. The problem is that when Dante was talking to the man, he was speaking of Guido in past tense, so the man thought his son had died. Overcome with grief, Cavalcante falls back into his burning tomb and doesn't reappear. This little exchange between Dante and Cavalcante highlights something. The damned souls have a limited knowledge of events. They can see the future but are ignorant of the present. Cavalcante didn't know his son's current status. He could see that his son had died, but he did not know that it was something that would happen in the future. Currently, his son was just very ill. Dante gets curious and asks how the damned can foresee future events but not know what's happening currently in the living world. Faranita explains that when something is far off in the future, they can see it. It's the almighty ruler's way of tormenting them. Faranita calls it evil sight. But as the events draw near or become present, their vision fades to nothing. After the last judgment, when the portals close, they won't be able to see the future either. Time will cease and they will be fully blind to everything. This explains why Cavalcante didn't know about Guido. If Guido is alive now, that's the present which the damned can't perceive. As Virgil tells Dante that it was time to go, he asks Faranita to tell Cavalcante that his son Guido is actually alive. Dante returns to Virgil, feeling shaken and thoughtful. The encounter with these heretics has rattled him. Virgil though keeps him moving. They have more of hell to cover. Virgil though keeps him moving. They have more of hell to cover. Now Circle 7 is divided into 3 smaller rings because Dante classifies violence in 3 categories. There's violence against neighbors, violence against oneself, and violence against God or nature. Each of the rings has its own landscape and punishment. At the base of the rocky slope, Dante and Virgil arrive at Ring 1, those who commit violence against others. Here is where you will find murderers, warlords, tyrants, highway robbers, those who shed others' blood. Dante hears a river of boiling blood before he sees it. In it are immersed countless souls, some just ankle deep, others up to their neck, others completely submerged, all screaming in agony as they boil. The depth at which each sinner is immersed matches how much blood they split in life. The more blood they spilled, the deeper they sunk. Also guarding the blood river are groups of centaurs armed with bows and arrows. They patrol the banks, ready to shoot any soul who tries to rise above their allotted level. Dante and Virgil then arrive at Ring 2 of Circle 7, those who commit violence against themselves. For some reason, squanderers, those people who waste resources extravagantly, are also in this ring. This ring was a dark, scary forest with twisted trees and bushes. This haunted wood was full with tangled branches, no green leaves, all black and twisted. Dante could hear wailing, but he saw no one around. Virgil then informs him that those who were violent against their own bodies are punished here as trees. So every tree in this ring is a damned soul. At the last judgment, when the bodies of other souls are restored, the souls in this ring will not be reunited with their bodies. Since they cast away their bodies willfully, they won't get them back. Instead, their lifeless bodies will hang on their branches. They exit the woods and come to the edge of a desert. This is the third ring where the souls that committed violence against God, art, and nature are punished. The third ring is a blistering plain of burning sand with fire flakes constantly raining from above. The ground is always hot and the fire never ceases. As Dante steps out onto the sand, he sees a giant figure stretched out on the sand looking unbothered by the flames. He was still very defiant. Virgil said that this is Capaneus, one of the ancient kings who besieged Thebes. He had blasphemed Zeus and was struck dead by a thunderbolt, and so he is still here cursing God. Capaneus hears that no punishment will make him stop cursing God, even as the fire rain pelts him. The fire was so intense that even Dante and Virgil needed to find a path. Virgil guides them to the edge of the desert, where there was a little stream flowing. The ground where this stream is was cooler and walkable. While following the stream, Dante recognizes a soul. This soul is Brunetto Latini, his former mentor and a well-respected Florentine scholar. Dante exclaims and slows down to talk with him. Brunetto was a teacher/father figure to Dante, and Dante clearly still cares for him. Brunetto asks Dante, "What brings you here alive?" Dante explains the whole story so far. Dante had deep respect for Brunetto and wanted to sit down and talk to him for a little while, but Brunetto stopped him. He told him that if he sat down to talk, Dante would be stuck in that position for the next 100 years. So people in this ring cannot stop moving. If you stop to rest, you will be stuck. You just have to continue walking forever. If you choose to lay down and rest, the fiery flakes will continue to blast you in one position for the next 100 years. This is one of the worst tortures I have ever read. Dante also didn't expressly say what Brunetto did to be in hell, but the area where Brunetto was where sodomites were punished. So even though Dante respected his mentor so much because he was gay, Dante chucked him in hell too. Moving on, they come upon Gaion. This monster looks similar to a griffin. It has the face of a man, and the rest of the body was of a serpent with two shaggy claws and wings. Gaion was to be their ride to the 8th circle of hell. But before they hitch a ride, they see souls sitting at the edge of the desert by a cliff. These souls were the usurers. Usurers are lenders or loan sharks, and Dante really hated them. To him, lending at interest was unnatural gain and stood against God's natural order. On the neck of these usurers hung a leather purse with recognizable coats of arms of certain wealthy Florentine families known for their greed. The usurers had their eyes totally focused on the purses. They hardly spoke. Their entire focus was on their money bags as the fire flakes and the hot sand burnt them. After this interaction, Dante and Virgil hop on Geron and fly down to the 8th circle. The 8th circle is the layer dedicated to fraud. This circle is essentially a huge stone amphitheater made of 10 trenches. The first trench was for panderers and seducers. Dante sees 2 lines of souls marching in opposite direction. On either side of the line, horned demons with whips are driving them on, lashing the souls to keep them moving. If any soul slows down, whack, the demon whip cracks on them. These are the people who manipulated others for their own sexual gain or profit. Dante actually recognizes one guy in the line, Federico Cassianemico, a Bolognese noble who sold his own sister to a marquis that lusted after her. The second trench was for flatterers. This trench was filled with excrement. It was a river of human feces so disgusting that the stench was overwhelming. Flatterers are those who deceived others with insincere praise, basically talking shit in life, so now they are submerged in it. They hurry on to escape the nauseating smell. The next trench holds the simoniacs, named after Simon Magus in the Bible. These are the corrupt church officials who sold holy offices or favors. For example, asking family members to pay for the soul of a person so they can leave purgatory. Inside this trench, Dante sees a bunch of holes in the rock like an enormous honeycomb. From each hole, Dante sees legs and feet of sinners sticking out while their head and body are jammed inside the rock. The soles of their exposed feet was also covered in flames. Dante walks up to one of the holes and starts a conversation. Upon hearing Dante's voice, the soul introduces himself as Pope Nicholas III, a corrupt 13th century pope from the powerful Orsini family. The pope mistakes Dante for someone else. He cries out, "Oh, is that you, Boniface? Are you already here? The prophecy said you would come later. Are you early?" He's talking about Pope Boniface VIII, one of Dante's personal nemesis who was still alive in the year 1300. We can see the pattern. Everybody Dante didn't like ended up in hell. Dante quickly corrects him. "I am not Boniface, and I am not even dead. But who are you, so fallen?" Nicholas identifies himself and then brags about his nepotism and how he stuffed his family with church riches. At this point, Dante is already very upset. He starts denouncing Nicholas and the other churchmen in the trench, castigating them for turning the church into a money-making sham. Dante even references how Jesus gave Peter the keys to the kingdom without asking him for any treasures. Dante is over the top furious, which might surprise us because earlier he fainted with pity for lovers, but here he is, flaming a corrupt pope. Nicholas, with his feet burning, head stuck in a hole, listens in shame. Virgil is pleased at Dante's bold speech. When Dante is done, Virgil actually scoops Dante up in his arms and carries Dante down the slope to the next trench. The fourth trench is for sorcerers, astrologers, and false prophets, people who pretended to predict future events. When Dante looks into the trench, he finds what he sees strange and heartbreaking. The people in the trench are walking slowly around this circular ditch, but something is very wrong with them. Their necks and heads are twisted completely backwards. Dante found this scene very unsettling and pitiful. He actually starts to weep at the sight. Dante's reaction shows he still feels pity, but Virgil scolds him, telling him that these souls are getting exactly what they deserve. Feeling bad for them is questioning God's justice. Continuing on, they arrive at the fifth trench. This is where the souls of the Baratos are. Baratos are corrupt politicians. In this trench was a boiling black tar or oil, thick and viscous. At first, Dante does not see any soul. Then suddenly, he sees a demon running towards the oil while carrying a sinner on his shoulder. The demon then dunks the soul into the oil. Then other demons use long iron hooks to push the soul deeper in the pit. This was when Dante realizes that millions of souls was in the hot, boiling oil. The sixth trench was for hypocrites. In this trench, Dante and Virgil sees a parade of people walking in circles wearing cloaks. At first glance, they seem normal, but on closer inspection, Dante notices that the cloaks are oddly colored and shaped. On the outside, the cloaks are covered in dazzling gold, but the inside is lined with heavy lead. These cloaks weigh the wearers down massively, making them walk slowly. The cloak represents hypocrisy, outwardly all shining and righteous, but inwardly full of heaviness and deceit. Dante speaks to two friars. These friars are Catalano and Loderingo. They were notorious for not keeping peace in Florence, despite being hired to do so. Dante asks them if they know a way out because the bridge was broken. They say yeah, all the bridges in this next section collapsed in an earthquake when Jesus came to hell. As they talk, Dante sees something on the ground and he is shocked. A figure is crucified to the floor of the pit with 3 stakes. This soul is written, and every passing hypocrite steps on them on their walk. The friars identify him as Caiaphas, the high priest of Jerusalem, who urged the Pharisees to crucify Jesus, saying it is better for one man to die for the people. Thus, as punishment, Caiaphas is now crucified in hell, literally bearing the weight of all the hypocrites who pass by, internally getting trampled. Dante is like, man, Virgil, we gotta get out of here. So they leave the hypocrites behind and move on to the next trench. The 7th trench is for thieves. This trench is filled with terrible serpents that were hideous and had a strange shape. Naked souls run terrified in this pit, and the serpents wrap around them and bite them. When a snake bites a sinner, the sinner bursts into flames and burns to ash within seconds. Then miraculously, the ashes gather back together and the soul painfully reforms back into its human shape, only for the chase to start again. These souls in life stole others' properties, so in hell their very identity and form is repeatedly stolen and destroyed by these serpents. Also, thieves are sneaky like serpents, so Dante fills this trench with serpents as tormentors. Trench 8 is for false counselors or evil advisors. In the trench, Dante sees flames flickering all over but no visible souls. Virgil points out that the sinners are actually within each individual flame. Each flame contains a soul who deceived others, often for personal gain or evil ends. One person that Dante recognized was Ulysses from the Trojan horse story. Ulysses says that after the Odyssey, he didn't settle down. He still felt the itch to explore beyond the edge of the known world. At that time in the 1300s, they believed the world ended after a certain point. So Ulysses convinced his remaining crew to sail with him into the unknown, seeking knowledge of the uninhabited world. Ulysses and his men journeyed far into the southern hemisphere until they saw in the distance a colossal mountain. Unknown to them, this was the mountain of Purgatory, but as pagans, they couldn't reach it. Suddenly, a whirlwind came from the holy mountain and sank their ship. Ulysses and his men drowned. Ulysses' unrestrained desire for knowledge without divine sanction led to his doom, and now he's also damned for giving evil counsel to his crew. After Ulysses' flame departs, another flame comes by eager to speak to Dante after recognizing that he's alive. This flame contains the soul of Guido da Montefeltro, an Italian lord turned friar who was notorious for cunning strategies. Guido, thinking Dante might still go back to Earth, wants to know news of his region and also perhaps if Dante could clear his name. He tells Dante his story. Pope Boniface VIII once asked Guido, who was famous for his tricky counsel, for advice on how to destroy a troublesome family. Guido hesitated because he was trying to live a repentant life, but Boniface bribed him with a false promise. The Pope said he will absolve Guido of any sins in advance if he helped him. Guido listened to him and gave malicious advice to Boniface, which led to the destruction of that family. When Guido died, the monster Minos sent him to hell. Minos says, "You can't be absolved for a sin before you commit it. That's not how repentance works." Guido recounts how at his deathbed, St. Francis came for his soul, thinking he was a repentant friar. But the demon insisted Guido was coming to hell due to that one final counsel given insincerely. After hearing these tales though, Dante and Virgil move on to the 9th trench. This trench was for people who were sowers of discord. This trench is the goriest so far. In this trench are those who sowed division, political discord or social strife. Their punishment is that they are literally cut apart by a demon with a sword over and over. Dante sees the line of souls walking in a circle, and as each comes by the demon at one point, the demon slices them open horribly. Some are cut in half, some are decapitated, some have their limbs chopped off. The wounds bleed and their insides spill. Dante recognizes a soul here. He sees the soul of Muhammad, the prophet of Islam, and since he was opposed to Christianity, Dante saw him as a sower of discord. Dante also sees a man holding his own severed head like a lantern. This is Bertrand the Born. He instigated a rebellion of his son against his father, King Henry II and Prince Henry. Bertrand lifts his head by the hair, making the head speak to Dante. Dante is very shaken by all this carnage. Dante is so stunned by the gore that Virgil actually has to nudge him onward, reminding him they still have one more trench to see. Finally, they exit the bloodbath of discord and head to the last trench. The 10th trench is essentially Dante's version of a disease-ridden hospital ward. It's foul, stinky, chaotic and full of misery. The sinners here are the falsifiers, people who corrupted society by falsifying things. Alchemists who falsified metals, impersonators who falsified identities, counterfeiters who falsified money, and liars and false witnesses who falsified words. The shrieking from the people coming out of this trench was so loud that Dante had to cover his ears. Their punishment is to suffer every form of disease, filth and decay imaginable because they themselves were a disease to society. This ditch is full of stench, darkness, thirst, filth, screaming, scabs, fevers. After exploring this trench and talking to some souls, Dante and Virgil move to the final circle, the circle of treason. Dante and Virgil clamps out of the 8th circle and find themselves at the rim of a huge dark pit, the central well of hell. Here, Dante is startled by what looks like a bunch of towers looming in the darkness. As they get closer, he realizes those aren't towers. They are giant beings standing half submerged around the well like guards. These are the classical titans and giants who rebelled against the gods. Now they are chained up around the pits. One of the giants is Nimrod, the biblical king who commissioned the development of the Tower of Babel. Nimrod is blowing a trumpet, but when he tries to speak, it is just gibberish. Virgil tells Dante that because Nimrod's projects led to mankind not speaking the same language anymore, nobody would be able to understand him. They then approach another giant, Antaeus. This giant was not chained like the others. Dante begs him to give them a lift down to the 9th circle because there was no bridge. And Antaeus agrees. He lifts Dante and Virgil in his giant palm and lowers them down gently into the pit. They are now in the 9th circle of hell, the circle of treachery. Dante finds himself on Cocytus, a vast frozen lake. The air in this circle is freezing. There's no burning here, only cold. As Dante was walking, a voice tells him to watch where he's going. He looks down and sees people stuck in the ice with just their heads out. They were in pain, with their face pale and their ears frozen off. Their punishment is being denied all the warmth of love or light, just as their treachery was a cold act devoid of love. Circle 9 is divided into 4 zones. Dante then journeys to all the zones. Zone 1 is Cayenne, named after Cain, who betrayed and killed his brother. So the traitors here are traitors to Cain. Here the souls are frozen up to their neck in the ice and their head bent down. The souls here betrayed their own family. Dante doesn't talk to many but notes some names like Napoleone and Alessandro, 2 brothers who killed each other over inheritance. Now they are stuck together in the ice forever. Their foreheads are bowed and joined together. Their foreheads are bowed and joined together. Zone 2 is Antenora, named after Antenor of Troy, who according to medieval legend betrayed Troy to the Greeks. So the traitors here are traitors to country or party. These souls betrayed their political party, homeland or cause. They are frozen a bit deeper with only their heads above the ice. Dante accidentally kicks something with his foot. It's a soul's face. The soul yells at Dante, "Why are you kicking me?" Dante, fed up with all the evil, actually gets a bit confrontational. He doesn't apologize. Instead, he demands the soul's name. The soul refuses and even insults Dante. So Dante does something shocking. He says, "Then I'll make you talk," and grabs the soul by the hair, yanking and even pulling out some of it. The soul screams but still won't give his name. Another soul nearby shouts, "Boca, what the hell? Why you gotta be so difficult?" Dante now knows he's dealing with Boca degli Abati, a Florentine traitor who betrayed his own cavalry in battle, causing Dante's side to be defeated. Furious, Dante says, "I don't need to be nice to you, Boca. In fact, I will carry news of your shame to the world." He then rips out more of Boca's hair out of spite. Boca screams. This is the only time Dante straight up physically harms a soul. At this point, he has no pity left for traitors. So they continue their journey and get to the 3rd zone. Here they find the traitors to friends and guests. The souls in this zone are frozen, lying on their backs in the ice with their face staring upwards. So when they cry from the pain, the tears kind of collect around their eye sockets and freeze, and then form ice mask that locks their eyes shut. They can't even cry in peace. Dante is still cautious stepping around. One soul, upon hearing Dante's footsteps, calls out to Dante, asking him to please remove the frozen tears from his eyes so he can just cry a bit. He promises to tell Dante his story if he helps. Dante agrees. The soul identifies himself as Friar Alberigo. The friar invited some guests over to his house and had them murdered. Dante is shocked. Alberigo is still alive in the year 1300. He didn't die until later, so how is he here? Alberigo explains that sometimes a soul can fall to hell before their body dies if their sin is great enough. A demon will just take over their living body on earth while the soul comes to hell. After hearing all this, Dante, in a rather cold move, does not fulfill his promise to clear Alberigo's eyes. He basically says, "Alright, I got your story, but betrayers deserve no kindness, not even the slightest." This marks the final hardening of Dante's heart against sin. He was no longer the Dante that was fainting in pity. Dante and Virgil now move to the center of the lake. This is where you will find traitors to lords and benefactors. Zone 4 is called Judeca, named after Judas Iscariot, the ultimate traitor to his lord. Dante noticed that this zone was silent. There were no screams, but this was because the souls are fully submerged in the ice. You see their distorted shapes under the eyes. They can't speak or move. This is the lowest any human soul can go in hell. At the very center of hell, Dante sees a huge shape. As they come closer, he makes out a gigantic figure with his waist deep in the ice. This figure is Lucifer. Dante is speechless and frightened. Lucifer is fixed in the center of the ice lake. He's enormous. If you wanted to compare the size of Lucifer to that of the giants we've seen so far in hell, it would be like comparing an elephant with a small mice. Lucifer also has 3 faces on one head. One face looking forward, one to the right and another to the left. Each face also has a mouth. Lucifer also has 6 huge wings he flaps continuously, but instead of the wings lifting him up, they generate an icy wind that freezes the lake. In this area, there are 3 other souls with Lucifer, people Dante believe were the worst traitors since the beginning of time. These 3 souls are in Lucifer's mouth. The center mouth has Judas Iscariot. Judas betrayed Jesus, so he gets the worst punishment in hell. Lucifer is chewing Judas's head inside his mouth and then scratching his body with claws for all eternity. The other 2 mouths on the side hold the Roman senators Brutus and Cassius, who betrayed and murdered Julius Caesar. To Dante, Caesar was a divinely appointed ruler, and betraying him was unforgivable. But unlike Judas, who had his head in the mouth of Lucifer and constantly getting chewed on, these 2 had their feet inside the mouth and were constantly chewed on. So after seeing everything in hell, Virgil tells Dante that it was time to leave. The way out is actually through the center of hell. They have to climb down, or rather up. It's confusing, but they have to climb Lucifer's body. Virgil carries Dante and they start climbing. At the midpoint, which is around Lucifer's waist, Virgil does a sudden move. He turns himself around. Dante at first is scared because they were going down and now they are suddenly going up. Virgil continues climbing, but now their orientation has flipped. Dante realizes that they just passed the center of the earth, so gravity's pull had reversed. Now, instead of climbing down Lucifer, they are climbing upwards towards the southern hemisphere. They emerge through a tunnel-like cavity. They leave Lucifer stuck upside down below. According to Dante's law, when Lucifer fell from heaven, he got stuck at the core of the earth. So from his head to his waist is stuck. That's why in the 9th circle of hell we could see his head and wings, but not his leg. His legs was bent upwards towards the southern hemisphere. So imagine it this way. If Lucifer landed into the core of the earth, as he landed, his head was stuck in the core of the earth like this. Then his legs bent upwards. So if this is the core of the earth, let's say this is the core of the earth here. Lucifer's head is stuck here because he landed with his head. He landed this way. So Lucifer's head is at the core of the earth, and his leg is bent upwards towards the southern hemisphere. So his head, his wings, his torso, his claws is stuck at the bottom. Then his leg, where he fell, is upwards outside the core of the earth at the southern hemisphere. I hope that painted the picture. At the opening of the tunnel, Dante sees the sky with stars. Virgil and Dante crawl out, and at last they come out on the other side of the world, outside of hell. The final line of Inferno is a simple, hopeful image. Thence we came forth to see again the stars. And that, my friends, is Dante's journey through the 9 circles of hell. If I have the time, I will create a video on the other 2 parts of the Divine Comedy. Thanks for watching, like and subscribe.